Hello, I'm Brian Costello, and welcome to the Teacher's Journey podcast, where we talk with some of the best educators around about learning and life as they share the stories that made them the educators they are today. All right, thanks so much for joining us again on the Teacher's Journey podcast. My guest this evening is Doug Robertson, also known as the Weird Teacher. He's a fifth grade teacher in Gresham, Oregon, and he's the author of several books. He's the Weird Teacher, The Teaching Text,
You're welcome,
Classroom of One, and a novel he's written called The Unforgiving Road. So Doug is quite an accomplished author, but also an excellent teacher. And we're going to get a chance to dig into his story a little bit. So if you haven't already read He's the Weird Teacher, then you're in for a treat, because Doug's got some good stories. He does some really incredible things in the classroom and in his school, and to learn a little bit about how he got to where he is, I think is great to hear for all of us. So thanks again, Doug, for coming and joining me tonight. Absolutely.
I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So let's start this off at the beginning, because why wouldn't we start in the middle? So
it's
at the
a very
beginning,
good place to start.
The end is a wonderful place to start, but the beginning. So when did you just figure out, I'm going to be a teacher? Like, when did that really click?
I think I wanted to be a teacher for as long as I can remember. I can't really remember any other reasonable jobs that I felt like I wanted. But it really solidified when I was a lifeguard. I was a lifeguard for like 100 years at a pool in Palmdale, in the town that I grew up in. And the best part of lifeguarding, aside from being paid to be in the sun and swim all day, was teaching swim lessons. That was the best. It was so much fun. And I already kind of felt like I wanted to be a teacher, but being able to work with the kids and see the growth, because swim lessons especially is like a real contracted period of time. I have 2 weeks with these kids. I'm going to see them every day for 2 weeks, and they're going to go from, some of them are going to go from being terrified of getting in the water to putting their heads in the water to swimming off the wall and swimming back to you and doing all kinds of stuff. And like, you get to see all of this really incredible growth really quickly. And that was like the final thing that was like, this is what I want to do when I go to college. I'm going to be a teacher. I want to get this feeling. I want to do this always.
Yeah, well, that's cool. So just like right at the beginning, you got that feeling like, I'm going to throw kids in the water and make sure they don't drown.
Yeah, exactly.
That's awesome. So it's,
but you let them drown a little bit sometimes, just a little bit,
just enough to know the water's there,
just so they know that it's a little bit dangerous, but also that they can do it.
That's when the fun comes in, right? When they realize they're passing the danger.
That's right.
So you go to college, you're going to become a teacher, and for most people, this part of the experience is like pretty generic. But I know you have some things that happen in college that kind of shaped a little bit how you how you work in the classroom. So talk about acting and how acting has impacted your classroom.
My very first college class, the very first thing I took in college was introduction to acting. It was the first thing first classroom I walked into in college, and we're all waiting, and this skinny, young-looking guy sweeps into the room, and he says, "What ho, what news?" And then he just starts, and everybody's like, "Holy crap, what is going on?" And it was amazing. And his name was Mr. Ingman, Jeff Ingman. And he was just the best teacher that I've ever had. He was dynamic and fun and interesting and incredibly passionate, because he was an actor, he was a director. So he loved his subject matter, and he really felt like he wanted us to love it as much as he did. And I took so much from just his attitude about teaching and the way he would approach it, and then also his style really worked for me. It was very flamboyant and big and theatrical, of course, and so that was a lot of like, I really want to teach like that guy. And I took a next level acting course, not because I had to for my degree, but because I wanted to watch him teach some more. And then I took a movement class that he was teaching just because I wanted to watch him teach some more. And I really felt like that helped me with who I am in the classroom. I believe strongly that teaching is acting. There's a lot that we do in the classroom that is not necessarily exciting, not necessarily interesting. So it's a lot of sales. It's a lot about how you do it and how you get into it and how you help your audience pay attention. And I know the kids aren't just the audience. It's a student-centered classroom, and I'm speaking like it's a teacher-centered classroom, but the fact of the matter is sometimes they have to follow me and they have to watch me. And so I better be really good when I am in front of them, and I do have to do that time on stage, and that's a theater thing. So that's really where a lot of that came from. And Jeff Ingman is just, I can't say enough about him. I wrote about him in the first book, and he's the weird teacher, and I sent a copy to him. I like hunted him down. He was working at a different university, and he sent me back like the nicest email I've ever gotten. It was amazing. He was just like, because he's very emotional guy, so it was just this very heartfelt thank you. And like as a teacher now, like thinking about one of my students writing a book and talking about how my teaching inspired them to become a teacher, I can't imagine what that would feel like. So
or even
it was just
inspire them to
really
do
cool.
anything, right? Just to the fact that they would come back and feel strongly enough to write in there, put you into their story
Absolutely,
as,
yeah.
as part of the inspiring piece. So I think it's interesting that you took these classes and you had this teacher, and you didn't necessarily need to take more acting classes. You took the classes to observe him as a teacher. I mean, obviously, you probably were also interested in the subject matter and enjoyed it because of his teaching. But part of your own personal training, learning for becoming a teacher was to observe this person. And
Right, yeah. And it's kind of, it's always about taking control of your own professional development. And even as a student teacher, even as somebody learning to do it, I'm still going to follow these threads that will help me. And taking those classes also, like when I eventually run everything, when I'm in charge, when they let me be in charge, and I design teacher education courses, theater will be a prerequisite. Like I think I took it, it was like one of those, you have to take one of these arts classes, and there will be a acting 101 that you have to take in my university if you
Secretary of
want to be a teacher.
Education Doug Robertson, theater is part.
Oh
Theater is part of
God,
part
yeah.
of the close. We could do worse.
We are doing worse.
It happens. So, so you're in you go through college. You found some good people to take a look at and help you out with. And I know that like when I didn't go to college to teach, but when I went through my teacher training, which was partially on the job, I had some good people that I modeled what I did afterwards. And at some point, I realized that I wasn't getting. I couldn't be that person. I had to be somebody. I had to be my own person, and I wasn't going to be that person. But so you get in the classroom, day one. What was that like? Like you walk into your very first class, the first day, the door closes, the kids are all there staring at you, and it's time to go. Like what was that feeling like? What kind of
Oh,
how did that go?
I was so bad. I mean, all of us, I think, were, but I felt like I was really bad. Well, because my day one kind of flexes depending on how you talk about it. Because before I was a contracted teacher, I was a substitute for like 2 years almost. And a lot of that time spent substituting was in long-term subpositions. The teacher would get pregnant and have to go out, and I would get to take over their classroom. And I had an amazing experience in a third grade class doing that. Just the best kids in the world. But then I got a job as a overflow teacher. So there were too many fourth graders and too many fifth graders, I believe, at this school. So they created another class, and that class got fourth and fifth combo, which is already like, oh dear God, a combo class. And then they just kind of took the kids that were too many and put them into that class, and then put me in that class. And like I think back to doing. I didn't know what I was doing. Like, a combo class is hard, man.
That's a hard
And
job, yeah.
I remember
Especially the
just
first
getting
job.
so frustrated with the kids, and I'm fairly certain they didn't learn anything from me. I can't remember teaching them anything. I just remember feeling terrible. It was that job that you go home from, and then the girlfriend is there, and you're just like, you walk in the door and you start crying at her, and she's like, "What's wrong?" And you're like, "I suck at, I'm so bad at this.
I've
I'm
decided
such
to
a
do this with my
terrible
life for
teacher."
so long, and I can't get any of this right.
Exactly. I don't know what I'm doing. They know I don't know what I'm doing. This is terrible.
That's even worse when you can't even hide that you have no. That's one of the things I made a point to try and do really well my whole first year was to hide the fact that I had no clue.
Oh
I
yeah, and I lied. I lied my first 3 years to the students when they asked how long I'd been teaching. I always said 3 years. I never told the class that it was my first year of teaching because I was
my
worried that the parents would freak out that, oh my god, I have a first year teacher. So I always told them it was my
I
third
I
year.
did the same thing, but I had counted my three. I worked for 3 years as a sub and an aide and everything. So I just did neglected the
Counted
fact.
those.
I neglected the fact to mention that I wasn't the teacher in those classes. I was just I co-taught in a couple of them, but I was never the teacher of record. It was never my responsibility. And that's that thing when you close the door and you're responsible for those kids. It kind of changes everything, right? It's just a little different.
Absolutely, yeah. And when I was doing that job, because I was subbing, and subbing is kind of, you don't know when your next paycheck is coming. I worked every day, but you never really knew. So I was also waiting tables. I was a waiter at the old spaghetti factory. So there were stretches where I would work, 14, 16, 18 days in a row because I would have weekend shifts at the restaurant. I would be subbing during the day. Sometimes I would be leaving school, going straight to the restaurant. So I'd be working from whatever time school started until the restaurant closed. Like, that was brutal.
That
It was a
that
rough
sounds
time.
very familiar to me. Yeah, I still do that some days, and I've been teaching for 10 years, so there's still days I go right to the restaurant after I finish in the classroom because
But
just
my
not having
first
to do it.
real day was third grade third grade at this tiny little school, and it was me and one other third grade teacher, and be in the best possible situation, we were both first year teachers. So the whole team was just me and her, and we were both first year teachers. We got along really well. I've lost touch with her. I wish I could find her again. I've looked for her Facebook and Twitter, and I can't find her.
She
But
must not
she was
be
a lot
around.
of fun. But I remember, like, I have this memory because I was in California, and in California there was a class cap, so you can't have more than like 20 kids in third grade, and we both had like 25 kids, and I vividly remember both of us going to the principal and being like, I can't believe that we have so many kids. I have 25 students in my class. There's so many. And eventually they got us a third teacher, and we both, and then like all three classes had like 15 or 17 kids or something. And now I have 31 students this year. I had 37 last year, and I think
Wow,
back to
37.
complaining about 35, and like, I wouldn't murder a hobo for a class size in the 20s because murder is wrong, but I would do real terrible things, I think, for a class size that started with a 2 in the tens place. It would be really cool.
It just changes. One of the things I learned really fast is once you get over 25, every single one of those kids that you add into the class matters a whole lot.
Oh
Like
my god.
22, 23 is not a big deal. I've had classes of 12 before because I worked at a tiny school where there was one grade level per. So I mean, I can't complain. I definitely have had classes that's almost too small for a whole class for me.
Yeah, right?
The dynamic gets a little bizarre, but the that once you hit over that 23, 20, like once you hit about 25 or 26, every single time you add a kid to the class, it amplifies things by so much.
And it's just, you're constantly rolling the dice because there's always going to be like one kid that just totally screws up the chemistry. Sometimes a kid will just, I got a kid this year, a few weeks ago, that she came in and she was just perfect. She fit bam, right into the class. I didn't really have to do any training or like help her adjust. She just like slid right in. But
Yeah.
sometimes you get a kid and you're like, oh my God, you ruined the chemical composition is now different. And it's not that the kid
I've been
ruins the
cultivating this for so
classroom,
long, and
but they just throw everything out of whack and it takes forever to fix it.
yeah, I know.
Not fix the kid, but fix the
Fix
classroom. I
the
want to
dynamic. Yeah,
make that clear that
yeah,
you're
yeah.
not fixing the kid.
No fixing children. Yeah, yeah.
Exactly.
I
They're
know.
not broken.
I had one class one time where I had two new kids coming in January, and the class actually adjusted the kids like they were the ones who were on top of it. So also, I didn't have to do anything. I said I would if I could teach this class every time, every
Yeah,
year for the
right.
rest of my career. I would teach them every year until they graduate college because the chemistry was perfect, and every time a new kid popped into the class, they took it upon themselves. And I just said, I didn't appreciate how great. At the time, it was like my third year of teaching, so I just thought I was that great. Uh, it's like, wow, I am really good at this. And then all of a sudden, I realized later on when that wasn't that group of kids anymore, when the chemistry was off. I mean, still had things going really well, but you get that new dynamic and changes everything.
Mm.
So when did you so when you've gone through this, you get that first year, you and another brand new teacher kind of working it out, you get through the subbing, the working every day of the week type of thing, that exhaustion. At what point were you like, I got this, I think I've got this, like I think I know what I'm doing pretty well now. I mean, obviously we never really know what we're doing, we're still always getting better at it, but at what point were you kind of, I think I'm pretty good at this?
Probably year 4, somewhere around year 4, I think. Because the way I went was I did that first year in California, and then I moved to Hawaii. And I did a year in 3rd grade in Hawaii, and that was a great year with an amazing team. Like it was a really big team. I think there were 4 or 5 of us. And one of the teachers was basically like my mom. She just kind of adopted me, even though she would never admit it. I would call her mom and she would be like, I'm not your mom. I would be so embarrassed if I was your mom, but like in a loving way. Like she would also show up in my room in the morning and be like, we're doing this lesson on sneakers today. Here's the stuff. And I would be like, oh, thank you, Susan. This is
Thank you,
great.
Mom.
Exactly. But then the year after that, which was my 2nd year in Hawaii, 3rd year of teaching, I ended up in 6th grade because when you're new, you get moved around a lot. And I worked with the most awful human beings ever. And again, not the kids. I loved my 6th graders. I worked with these 2 teachers who called themselves, and it's not a joke, it's not hyperbole, and it sounds like it is, Hammer 1 and Hammer 2. And if you got in trouble in one of their classes, you would get in trouble in the other class. Like the kids were scared of these women, and these women were very proud of that. And I learned a lot about teaching that year. Like you learn a lot from negative examples. And it was it was that culture and that attitude where like at lunchtime, they would just talk negatively about the kids for all of lunch. And like it was fun. So by October, I had stopped eating lunch with the grade level. I was eating lunch in my room by myself because I just couldn't handle these women. By November, I was in my principal's office like, you have to get me out of this grade level next year. I can't handle these people. I refuse to work with them again. And that was a miserable year, but I actually learned a whole lot about teaching. I think I overcorrected to feel like I was bouncing while I'm out because they were so mean. So my class probably got away with more than they should have, just because I was like, I'm sorry that these women are awful. Because in 6th grade for my kids, we would swap. Like I would take a class for PE and they would get a class for extra math or for social studies or whatever. And it was just it was terrible. It was awful. But then the year after that, I went back to 3rd grade. And then I've been teaching that's my 4th year. I've been through this awful experience. I'm back in this good experience, and I've got a really good group of kids, a really good team. And then I start feeling like I think I know what I'm doing. And then I moved on to fourth grade. And by the time I got to fourth grade, I felt really solid. And the next year I got a student teacher, and then you learn everything. Like having a student teacher teaches you everything about teaching, because if you do it right, because then you're constantly like telling another person, why did you do this? I did this because X, Y, and Z. Or why did you do this? I did this. Why did I do that? That's a really good question. I don't know why I did that. Crap. I need to, and it like forces reflection. And
that's
so
one
that's
of the
really,
things when I had a student teacher, I remember I watched her do something, and I looked at it and I was like, she saw me do that. She saw me do that, and that's terrible. Don't do that. I walked out after class. We sat down every day and we talked. And every class, one day I saw her do it. I said, you were doing this, and I know why you're doing it. I said, you're doing it because every day you come in and you've been watching me do it for like a week straight, and it's wrong. I said, don't do it. It's just kind of that humbling moment where you realize I am teaching this person by failing miserably in front of her face, and but it's really, really great reflection on that. So I mean. So talk about that, because you've worked with a couple student teachers, and your latest book, The Classroom of One, is all about that experience. So tell me about learning from being a teacher with a student teacher, and how that makes you better, how you address working with them, because I feel, and I've talked to a lot of up and coming pre-service teachers about this, and their experiences are so varied. So haphazard almost.
yeah. Well, I'm going to step back just a minute from that to kind of help make my point. I was never good at math in elementary school and high school. It was just never my thing. And I'm going to say this as a growth mindset format. I was never good at math, but I was learning to improve in math, except I wasn't back then. And the only time I started figuring out math when I actually had to teach it, I was substitute teaching in a middle school algebra class. And I remember looking at the book and being like, I don't, like the answer, the book says that the answer to number 7 is 28. And I don't know why. No idea. So, then I did the teacher trick. Well, I asked the kids, what's the answer to number 7? And the girl in the front says 28. And I'm like, good. Would you explain to the class why the answer is 28 and explain it slowly so that I can write it down too? And like learned how to do math by teaching it. I didn't really learn how to do fractions until I was teaching in Hawaii, and we had a Singapore math training, and the guy explained it, and I was sitting there like, oh my God, where were you 10 years ago when I was in school? Because now things make sense, and this never made sense before, and now I can teach it. And so by having a student teacher, I kind of felt like the same feeling. Like you really start to understand teaching when you have to teach someone else how to do it. And I'm a very strong proponent of if you want something done right, you have to do it yourself. And so by taking on student teachers, we are training the future of the profession. You cannot complain about what teachers are becoming if you have student teachers and you are shaping them in thine own image. And I tell them very explicitly, I do not want you to teach like me, but I want you to think about teaching like I do. And I am creating an army of teachers who thinks like me, and eventually we will take over education. But the only way for that to work is after you're done with me and you get your own job, then in 5 years, 7 years, when you feel comfortable, I demand that you take a student teacher and you do the same thing that we do, so that you will constantly be forwarding the messages. And that's kind of a lot of what a classroom of one is. It's also teaching student teachers to be reflective and forcing those conversations, because like you, I've seen that it's a really varied experience. I remember hearing some student teachers, not mine, talk about like how nervous they were for their first lesson because it was also their ed TPA lesson. And I was like, what do you mean? What,
Huh?
what do you mean? What have you been doing all year that your first real lesson is like when you're being observed or when it's your ed TPA? You should have been, student teachers should be in front of the kids every single day, doing something, even if it's just the morning work. My student teachers observe for about a week, and then frankly, that's boring. I don't care how good I am. It's boring to watch somebody teach. So my student teachers are in front of the room doing at least morning work, and we're slowly adding things on. And every day they're with me, they're doing stuff. Every day after school, we're talking about what they did, what I liked, suggestions that I have, ways that they could be better, lessons that they need to teach next time. And I tell them like right away, you need to tell me, I want to teach blank. Cool. So you need to come to me that morning and be like, are we doing vocabulary today? Yes, I want to teach it. I have an idea. Sweet. That's exactly what I want. And by doing that, they are able to take those risks that teachers should be taking and failing, but they're failing, and I tell them this, they're failing with a net. I'm there. They can break the classroom. It's okay because we're in this together and we can put them back together. You can have a terrible lesson. It's fine because we'll be able to fix it. And by getting that mindset in their heads during student teaching, then the idea is, and I've seen it work, that when they go into their own classrooms, they will continue to carry that. I'm not sure if this will work, but I'm going to try it because I think I will, because I think it will, and then I'm going to fix it mindset. And my student teacher last year has her own classroom, and I know she's pushing limits. I know she's standing up for herself, and she's kind of taking those things that she learned from me. And my student teachers in Hawaii are doing the same thing. One of them, I moved away from Hawaii after she graduated, and she took my job. So I was teaching fourth grade. I left, and she just stepped right into the classroom that we had been working in. The other student teacher that I had in Hawaii started working in sixth grade at that school that same year.
With the hammers.
Yeah. With that, yeah, I know, right? I think one of them finally got moved the year that he showed up. I hope so, because that would have been terrible. But it's just like, if we want them to be taking risks and we want them to be trying new things, then it is our responsibility as teachers to take on student teachers so that they will learn to do those things. And it is our responsibility to accept the time and accept the extra stress and the extra meetings and the extra paperwork, because at the end of the day, we're making the profession better. And I really kind of thought about it, and it so when I take a student teacher, I'm doing a couple of things. I'm improving this one teacher's experience now. I'm also improving the students that I have that year's experience, because they are getting the experience of having two different teachers who will teach two different ways. And that's good for them to get a variety of teaching. And then I'm also impacting the kids that they have next year. My student teacher, when they become a teacher, those kids are getting help from me indirectly because I helped their teacher become who their teacher is and be more prepared. So like, I'm hitting 3 different classrooms at the same time by being a mentor teacher, and it's really important to me. And I could go on for like another hour about it,
I know you could,
because I wrote a book about it.
So and that's one of the things I love, and it's one of the things that really fits in with the kind of message that I'm hoping to put out for people is that we can all make each other better, that we all have to kind of help out in our own way, figure out a way to make. One of the things I wrote about and I talk about a lot is, when my dad was, when I was a kid, my dad used to coach everything. He used to coach football and basketball, and I didn't play football and I didn't play basketball. I played soccer and I played golf, and he coached those things too. He coached everything. I said, why do you do that? Why do you coach all that stuff? And he still goes and like helps out at football practice. I haven't been, I'm well, but I don't even live in the same town anymore. Like I'm nowhere near like, and he still goes and does that stuff. And I said, well, why do you do that? And he said, because this is our community and we ought to give back to it. Like when I was a kid, the adults in my community gave back to the community. And when I think about that, you think about your local community, but I also think about the teaching community, like our profession, our community. If we really want it to be a better place, we have to give back to it in some way. And that's one of the things I love about your whole philosophy on student teaching and about sharing what you do. So you talked in there about risks and helping people take risks. Did you ever have a time where you tried to do something or you took a risk and you just kind of fell flat on your face or just really didn't come out the way you wanted and you kind of had to figure out a way to pick yourself back up again?
The one that jumps out at me immediately when I think about that kind of a thing is the school that I worked at before the school that I'm at now. So I'm in my third year at my current school. So it was, I guess, 4 years ago. Just a really unfriendly environment. Again, the kids were great, and at this point my team was really strong, but my administration, vice principal specifically, the principal was great, but the vice principal had it out for me. And I know everybody says that, how come you did bad? The teacher didn't like me. The VP had it out for me.
The principal didn't like me.
Exactly. I was wonderful. She didn't like me. She didn't like me.
How could anyone know?
Exactly. I don't understand. And we really butted heads because I was like taking the legs off the desks and giving them beanbag chairs and giving them a ton of cardboard and making stuff. And she was like, you need to have the objectives written on the board and they need to be doing X, Y, and Z. And how come your lesson plans don't look like lesson plans should? And I was like, because you suck and you don't understand. And you can really only tell a principal or a vice principal that they're dumb so many times before that starts to go badly for you.
Once, maybe.
I do not recommend it,
maybe
even if
once.
you really wanna. Even if it feels really good.
You heard it here first. Doug Robertson does not recommend telling your administrators they're dumb.
This is the kind of really good advice that you get from me. Don't tell your administrator that she's stupid, even if she is. But I took a lot of risks that year, and most of them backfired just because of how miserable she made my time. I feel like they worked really well for the kids, and I'm continually evolving stuff that started that year. But I did it in the wrong situation, and I kind of went about it in the wrong way. And the calling your VP stupid thing is hyperbolic to be funny. But at the same time, you need to be in the right situation to push like that. And so that's what makes me really frustrated. Sometimes you see people like, teachers just need to be innovating. And they just put that just in there. Like it's just a thing that you can do. Anybody can do it. It's like, well, sometimes it's real hard. And I feel like everybody can do it in some way. Even in the most tight-fisted school, your principal's not in your room all the time. You can still, get that stuff in there. It just depends on the level and to the extreme. And I was pushing much harder than the administrator wanted to be. And if I cared, then that would have been bad. But I'm very mature when it comes to somebody that I don't like and don't respect telling me I can't do something. I'm like, then I will do it at 11. And then I will teach at a different school. And now I'm at a school that is wonderful, and my principal loves me, and I love her. And she talks about the things I do, and she is like, I don't understand some of the things you do, but your kids seem to be learning, and they love being in your class, so I'm okay with it as long as your kids continue to learn. So, maybe you can tell your principal she's stupid as long as you have somewhere else to go. Even though I didn't have somewhere else to go, I just got real lucky.
Just got lucky and found the right place, right?
The point of that whole thing was, don't tell your administrators off unless you really want to.
Because it will make your year less than desirable.
You will make things hard. I could have made that year much easier on myself by just biting my tongue. But that's just not who I've been. And I had been teaching for long enough. That was year 9 or 10 at that point, I think. You've been teaching long enough that when somebody talks to you like your first year teacher, you're like, no, nope, not putting up with it. We're going to go around and around, and I know I'm going to lose because you're the boss, but I don't care.
Yeah, see, I had that mentality when I started. I was just like, yeah, even though I had no idea what I was doing half the time, I still thought, no, you're wrong about that. and it took another teacher who, at least in that one moment, was a great mentor for me, and she just said, just don't say a word, because she likes you. She might be mad at you right now, but she likes you. And if you go in there and start guns blazing, she is going to roast you. Like, you are going to be done. Like, this year is over. But if you just walk away, smile, and say yes, said she'll like you again next week. She'll forget all about this. And she was so right. And that administrator saved my job. So it was kind of like, I was like, wow, that was incredible advice, not to go in there and tell off my boss and argue with her about how I was right.
That pick your battles lesson is so important, even especially in education, because there's so many little battles that we fight all the time. And sometimes in a staff meeting, you need to just shut up. It's not really I know the principal's face is saying that thing that makes all of us mad, but you and I both know that it's not actually her decision. Somebody above her is telling her that. And if you complain about it in a staff meeting, you're just making the staff meeting longer, and you're frustrating her and everybody else, and you're not actually making anything better. Pick a different fight. And this principal, especially because her and I get along really well, when I do have an issue, I'm doing it in her office. I'm like, can I come in and talk to you for just like a second? I didn't like X, Y, and Z, and I didn't want to do it in front of everybody else because that's not cool.
Which your administrator will appreciate so much if that's how you approach it. Because I mean, they don't want to get called out in front of the staff, and they don't want to deal with that either.
Right. I'm not trying to take her power. Just like I wouldn't do that to my student. I accidentally did it to my student teacher. I'm going to say all that stuff. I accidentally took my student teachers of power away. On Wednesday, the kids were just really misbehaving and really not on task. So I jumped in the middle of her lesson and kind of gave them a piece of my mind in the most educational, professional, wonderful way. But still, and she was kind of in the middle of her thing, but they needed it. And then after school, I apologized to her. I was like, I'm sorry, you should have done that. I should have taken you aside really quickly and told you that you needed to address this, but I was done having it. But it's important to always be considering the power dynamic and who has the power and who is trying to take the power away from somebody else. And it extends all the way down to our interactions with our students.
I once let she was an observing teacher, but she was teaching classes in my classroom, like probably taught 6 classes, and she taught one lesson that she was really excited to teach, and it totally flopped. And I had to buy candy for the custodial staff after this. They were making obolek, and it did not go well. The procedures were just they just weren't going to work for this group of kids, and there was flour all over my room and like everything with sticky stuff everywhere. And I was like, she's like, that was awful. She's like, why did you let me finish that? I said, because sometimes it's awful. Sometimes it just is. Sometimes it's terrible. I said, so let's sit down and let's go over because it wasn't awful. The whole thing wasn't awful. There were like 3 or 4 things that you could have changed that would have gone from awful to great. I said, and the difference between an awful lesson and a great lesson can be 2 or 3 things. Really, and that was it was really hard for me to sit there and let her go. And I kind of wanted to stop her, but at the same time, I kind of wanted her to pick that up and see, I wanted to give her the chance to try and correct things as she went to, and it just kind of, we didn't get there. So, but it was, and she's one of the most well-prepared, very organized, very on top of things, and also very good with the kids. So I was really impressed with her as a pre-service teacher. But I just feel like this has to happen sometimes, because sometimes you got to see that it's okay. Like, what happened in the end? You know what? I need a vacuum. That's all that happened in the end, you know?
And I normally would let my student teacher fail like that or struggle like that. Just that particular example, it just
happened. Yeah.
It had been one of those days to begin. I think it was a full moon or something. And, when you tell a non-teacher, no, I know that it's a full moon, they're like, sure you do. No, actually, I don't know what happens. I don't know why.
Scratching my ears with my feet, It just happens.
I tell my students that. They're like, werewolves aren't real. And I was like, yeah, if a werewolf was real, then it would probably be kind of short and furry and would have long hair, probably like a beard or something. And they're like, yeah. Wait a minute. For those of you, because this is an audio podcast, I am short and furry, and I have long hair and a beard.
Yes. For those of you who can't visualize this, well,
now that I have explained the joke, it is funnier.
You have to, look up Doug Robertson and find a picture of him on the cover of one of his many books. And,
exactly.
So it's impossible to stop this conversation at any reasonable amount of time. So for those people who've managed to listen to all of these great anecdotes and stories, Doug's now made it through all this part. He's giving back to the profession, and he gives back not only to student teachers, but also through writing his books. He's the Weird Teacher, which I got to tell you, when I read that the first time through, I said, that's me. Yeah. I mean, we have so much in common. We had so much in common. I felt like I knew you before we'd actually met, because your story was so similar in so many ways to mine. I didn't save kids from drowning. I was one of the kids who needed saving from drowning. But, just the whole outlook on what the teaching in the classroom looks like. So for those people who have managed to listen to all this wonderful stuff and haven't gotten bored and disappeared.
Hey. None of that was boring.
None of it was.
It was all amazing and entertaining and engaging. You're welcome.
Breaking a song now. So other than, musical performance yet to come from Doug Robertson.
Yeah, that's right.
That'll be exclusive. You get the exclusive content later on in the podcast future. We get the live musical performance by Doug Robertson.
Those are the people who give lots to the Patreon.
But if you could tell teachers at any level, new teachers, old teachers, teachers who hate their jobs because they've given up on life or job teaching, what would you tell teachers to just help them be better people, better teachers, have better lives with their profession, with their education, as a life as a teacher?
Oh no. I have to come up with a soundbite.
Summarize yourself in 6 words now.
Exactly right. It's funny because I go on all of these rants about oversimplifying education and blah 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 when it comes to some of these Twitter people who are just like, just be happy, it'll be fine. Yeah, that's all you need, is just to be happy. But I think maybe keep a good mindset, because that's a fancy word that we're all using now, is to keep in mind that at the end of the day, our job is to hang out with kids, and that's awesome. Our job is so cool, even when it's hard and the kids are frustrating, or the paperwork is frustrating, or the administration is frustrating, or Betsy DeVos is a moron and should quit and be set on fire and shot in the sun. At the end of the day, I get to spend all day hanging out with a bunch of really cool kids who are hilarious and really smart and constantly surprising me. And as long as I let myself be constantly surprised by my kids and enjoy my time with them, the other stuff becomes much, much easier and much, much lighter. It doesn't go away. It's still all stuff that we have to deal with. But keeping that kind of in the forefront really helps.
Yeah. And it's interesting. One of the things I said to somebody just this week is they said they were frustrated because kids, they're trying to do things with them and they keep screwing it up. I said, they're middle school kids. Like
That's what they do.
I said, you give them something and they beg to have it, and you give it to them, and then they destroy it. And then they turn around and beg you for the next thing because they really want that responsibility, but they don't know how to handle it. So they will constantly let you down.
And the only way for them.
Yeah. They're these really cool kids who are capable of doing these amazing things. You know, like I'm fortunate enough, I get to do all these really awesome projects with kids. But they, you know, and some of them just don't finish them. They start and they're like, it's not done, whatever. But a lot of them put out this really awesome stuff. So when you get frustrated about the fact that they're screwing up all these wonderful opportunities you're giving them, just remember that that's your job. Your job is to keep giving them opportunities over and over again, so that eventually they get it right when it matters. You know, when it matters for real with them, and when they really have to make it work, they're better people. And you get to hang out with them and try that.
That's another good one. Yeah.
Let's just make you think of the whole thing. Yeah.
It's okay to suck. I tell that to my kids. Not suck because they giggle, but it's okay to be bad at something. You're supposed to be. You're supposed to be bad at something.
Yeah.
It's good for you.
We're all bad at things.
That's right.
Absolutely. So one more time, just to remind everybody, you can find Doug Robertson on Amazon, and you find all his books there. He's the Weird Teacher, The Teaching Text, Classroom of One, and his novel, which I would love to talk more about someday, but we've been spending so much time talking about all the great stuff you have to talk about for teaching. We'll have to talk to Doug Robertson, the fiction author, another time. So you can find all those great books on Amazon. I wouldn't be surprised if Doug started working on another book already and just hasn't told us. I saw the eyebrow raise a little bit there, so maybe I'm onto something.
No. I'm taking a break.
And
I'm sucking at something right now. I'm learning to play the bass.
Yes, I saw that recently. Yeah, playing the bass. I have a bass. I never got past the bass, like the very, very basics. And then my family did not want to hear me play the bass over and over again. So, but we lived in an apartment when I was playing the bass. So you can find Doug there. You can find him on Twitter at The Weird Teacher. And yeah, I highly recommend, getting a chance to touch base with Doug, reach out and contact him, talk to him, ask him questions. He's a great resource and a good person on top of all that. So thank you again for coming on and sharing all this story. And yeah.
Absolutely. And if you're not sure if you want to jump into a book, I write blogs weekly, if not more, at he'stheweirdteacher.blogspot.com. So you can check that stuff out too. Sometimes about teaching, sometimes about other random things, but always entertaining. Absolutely. So absolutely. Yeah. Please check it out. You won't regret it, or maybe you will, but it'll be entertaining regardless. So thanks so much again, Doug. I really appreciate your time and you sharing everything you have with us tonight. So thanks again. Absolutely. Thank you. Thanks, everybody, once again for listening. And I want to thank our guest one more time, Doug Robertson, the Weird Teacher, for joining us on the teacher's journey and sharing his incredible journey with us. Really love his inspiring story and discussion about giving back to the profession. So you can follow us, check out the next podcast by following us on iTunes, Spreaker, Google Play, or SoundCloud. And if you're interested in teacher's journey and want to learn more about the previous podcasts or check out the blog, you can find us at www.theteachersjourney.net. Thanks again for everybody listening, and we'll catch you next time on the journey.